Thank you, Carl. You're the best. And thank you, TEDx Lansing. I guess I'll have to do this. And I can't see them. The 20th century was an American century. The great inventor, Thomas Edison, started work in a chemistry lab that he set up in his childhood home in Port Huron, Michigan. Although he eventually held over 1,000 patents, his real genius lay in bringing bright minds together from different fields to solve problems. He invented our system of industrial research and development that made the US the leader in science and technology. Now, if you look closely at the collage of his inventions, you'll see that it's actually a Google Doodle commemorating his birthday. By the end of the century, we actually had this proliferation of knowledge tools, the internet, the World Wide Web, and Google, which also has a Michigan connection. It's this combination of human collaboration and knowledge tools that'll serve as the basis for innovation in the 21st century. The principles of innovation remain the same, making unusual connections, while the underlying technologies evolve. And one of the current technologies is social media. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the recreational purposes of social media, but I'm going to jump into some real-world examples of how it's being used for serious purposes. Now, this is being driven by emergencies, but it's starting to have an impact on our overall health and well-being. Remember the London bombings in 2005? 3 bombs went off in the London Underground, and within 18 minutes, the first entries appeared in Wikipedia. By the end of the day, over 2,500 people had contributed to document what had happened. Just 7 weeks later, Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast of the US, leaving 1,500 people dead and over 1 million people displaced. Desperate to find their loved ones, they started posting messages in hundreds of online bulletin boards. I'm looking for my daddy, looking for my son. The key contact information was buried in this narrative pleas for help, but some geeks came to the rescue. They extracted all the key contact information and put it into a single searchable database called the Person Finder. And remember that, we're going to see it again. In April of 2009, pandemic H1N1, or swine flu, was declared. I had started working at the regional office of the World Health Organization just 2 days earlier. That was on a Friday, and by Monday we were asked to facilitate a virtual meeting of all the ministers of health in the hemisphere in 3 languages. We did this using web conferencing, which was already installed in all the country offices, and we also had to bridge in regular phones. We had live interpreters in one of our meeting rooms in DC, and we set up 3 virtual rooms, 1 for each language, so everybody could participate in the language of their choice. In total, we hosted over 17,000 virtual meetings that year. In January of 2010, Haiti was affected by a massive earthquake, which left almost 250,000 people dead and millions homeless. The first challenges were finding people trapped in the rubble and treating the injured. But the phone system was totally out of commission, the public phone system, and most of the cell towers were down. So what were the first messages out of Haiti? Email, Skype, and Facebook. For the first 24 hours, Haitians rescued Haitians with whatever they had at hand. But when trained responders started arriving with equipment, how were they to find the people that were still trapped in the rubble? Once again, some modern-day volunteers sprang to the rescue. This is a crisis camp event in Washington, D.C., and around the table there are high-powered programmers, but also project managers, linguists, and graphic artists. I actually found a graphic that describes what they did. The group at the table you can see under the word crowdsourcing. They created a text code, 4636, which allowed people to text for help. And in the first 24 hours, they got over 1,000 messages. But the messages came in French and Creole. So volunteers from the Haitian diaspora came in to translate the messages and help locate places on the map. Meanwhile, the US military was doing surveillance, so they also shared their data, which allowed the crisis mappers to build out the maps and also passable routes using OpenStreetMap. It was really an incredible feat of collaboration. And one of the tools they used was a platform called Ushahidi, which means testimony in Swahili. It was originally developed for citizen journalists to track post-election violence in Kenya, but it's been adapted for use in emergency response and wildlife conservation. People Finder appeared again, except now it works in English, French, Spanish, and Creole, and it's a Google module that can be placed on anybody's website. There's now an OpenStreetMap community of Haitians who continue to map out the more remote parts of their country, and this is particularly important because of the outbreak of cholera. As we are learning, one disaster tends to lead to another. Since the onset of cholera, maps have been created for cases of cholera, cholera treatment centers, and sources of safe water. And we're starting to see dashboards appear that bring all the information together into one place. Here we have YouTube videos, maps, Twitter, and news feeds, all related to cholera in Haiti. Now, cholera is treatable, but particularly in remote regions, many people were struck down before they could reach help. The Haiti Epidemic Advisory System was a mailing list that was set up to facilitate communication among the many groups that were working in health in Haiti. This is an actual message from a remote town calling for help. And within days, medical volunteers were able to arrive with the support of UN transport and supplies, and the whole village came out to help unload. We think of cholera as a bacteria, but it's actually a much more complex story. The Green Revolution in South Asia solved the problem of chronic famine, but it led to other problems. Deforestation and irrigation combined with seasonal rains to cause an increase in nitrogen runoff from fertilizer and human and animal waste. This led to a bloom of algae and tiny mollusks called copepods. It turns out that the cholera bacteria adheres to the chitin in the copepod shell, so it also multiplies. And that has resulted in the virulent form of cholera that's now present in South Asia and in Haiti. Groups are now forming to look at some of the longer-term challenges in Haiti: water and sanitation, health education, and sustainable housing. So leaders in emergency response in this country are all starting to take notice of social media. This was a simulation exercise held last fall of an earthquake off the coast of California, followed by a tsunami, an oil spill, and disruption of water supplies. It was hosted by the Visualization Lab at San Diego, but people from over 79 countries, over 12,000 people participated from around the world virtually. Some of their photoshopped images looked a little over the top until we started seeing the real images from Japan this March. Person Finder appeared in Japanese within 1 hour of the quake. And I actually know one of the deans at MSU used it to locate a faculty member that was in Japan at the time. And he got a response from the mother-in-law by the next morning. It was cold, so maps of shelters were created, and you could click on any of the balloons and find out what facilities were available. And when concerns arose about the risks from the nuclear plant, a crowdsourced map of radiation readings from various sources appeared. So we've heard about the use of social media for emergencies, but what are we actually dying from? If you had to choose between 1, infectious disease, 2, non-communicable diseases, heart attack, cancer, and stroke, or 3, injuries from war, traffic accidents, and violence, what would you pick? As of 1990, over half of the global deaths were due to non-communicable disease, and that's expected to rise to 73%, almost 3/4 by 2020. There's a difference between developed and developing regions. In 1990, the vast majority of deaths in developed regions were from non-communicable disease, whereas in developing regions, about half were due to infectious disease. But they're quickly approaching the developed country pattern due to the large number of people exposed to tobacco. The 2 leading causes of death are the same in low to middle income and high income countries. That's heart attack and stroke. This is followed by a series of respiratory conditions related to smoking and cooking over open fires. In low to middle income countries, there is a group of infectious diseases, whereas we see more cancers in developed countries. And finally, deaths related to childbirth, traffic accidents, dementias, and diabetes. Because people are living longer with chronic disease, they're seeking out advice and support from other people that have similar conditions. There are sites for diabetics to track their glucose levels. There are even sites for obesity in pets. Patients Like Me was founded for people that had rare diseases so they could connect with others with the same condition, but now it includes almost everybody. There are about 4,500 people on the site that have ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, and they heard about a preliminary trial that showed that lithium might slow the progression of their disease. So they decided to organize among themselves to conduct an experiment. The site worked with them on the study design and the analysis. A Nobel Prize winner was recently quoted in the Washington Street Journal saying that this was a faster and cheaper way to conduct clinical trials. Now, there are issues as well, but you can imagine that we could adapt to use this as a resource in the future. So we now have citizen-initiated research. We also have tens of thousands of citizen scientists playing an online game to help scientists determine how proteins fold, which will lead to another generation of discovery. But citizen scientists are not new. For decades, people have contributed to bird counts and environmental monitoring. It just means now that they can enter this data, collate it, and map it online. We have citizen activists and citizen reporters. Earlier this year, Clay Shirky wrote an article in Foreign Affairs about the political power of social media. He said that attention is focused on its role in helping topple governments, but its real potential lays in the long term in supporting civil society. This will produce change over years and decades, not weeks and months. So we're just at the beginning of the effect of social media. We now have all the ingredients for a more comprehensive approach to health, the health of our water, environment, food, economy, and society. So how can we save ourselves? We have to look beyond ourselves. We have to be the ears and eyes and reporters of what's going on around us. We need better tools to combine data, maps, and opinions in real time so we can make good decisions about the health and well-being of ourselves, our communities, and our planet. Thank you.